Hi everybody, David here from Via Render. In this video, let's take a look at how you can use Quixel Megascans in your D5 scenes. I'll go through how to get assets from the Megascans library, how to install them into D5, and how to utilize them to make your own render scenes. Before we talk about using Megascans in D5, let's go ahead and talk really briefly about our SketchUp scene. I've gone ahead and built a rectangle. This will be our water. Water material will be assigned to this in D5. And we also need some area for the landscape. Let's go Tools, and we're going to go Sandbox. Let's go Draw and Sandbox. And we're going to do this from scratch. I'm going to hit Tab on my keyboard to adjust the grid spacing. I'm going to put that down to 5 feet. Apostrophe, there we go. And I'm just going to left click over here, and that looks good. Left click again, and then just move your mouse to produce our sort of geometry grid. That looks really nice. I'm going to go into this group. We're going to go Tools, Sandbox, and Smooth. And I'm just going to lift this up. Just add a little bit of surface variation. It's just, any environment, you wouldn't get this artificially flat environment. So let's just go ahead and just move those a little bit. We can have a little bit more distortion off in the distance because that won't be as visible. But if your camera is down here, you want to make sure that the ground is not perfectly smooth. Now, one thing you may also want to do is to go in here, select everything, right click, and go to Reverse Faces. Not really sure why, but I think the sandbox tools just do kind of make the faces reverse by default, so that might help going forward. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to apply just a gray concrete to this. This will eventually be our sort of stone landscape. Okay, that looks pretty good. So here we are on the web page for the Quixel Megascans. So just a little bit of background. Quixel was a company that was used as they were involved in game development, more specifically the creation of sort of procedural texture mapping done within Photoshop. The original Quixel Dido, which is going back quite a bit, was used for texturing assets directly in Photoshop. You could adjust the maps and so forth. And it was quite an impressive little tool. And this had come out just before Substance Painter. So it was kind of ahead of the curve in terms of multifunctional texture painting. Jump forward a few years, and Quixel is now involved in the production of physically based assets, including materials and objects. They've since been acquired by Epic. And once Epic acquired them, Quixel Megascans went free. Now, we should point out, Quixel Megascans is intended to be free for use within the Epic sort of environment. So this is the use of either Twinmotion or the Unreal Game Engine. However, you are able to go ahead and sign up and set up an account and agree to the terms and conditions. But if you want to test it out first, you can kind of see here that there is a large section of free assets. You can download surfaces, brushes, decals, atlases, leaves, plants, things like that. And to be honest, it's intended for use with the Unreal Game Engine and Twinmotion. But again, it is free. You can go ahead and sign in and just set up an account and start downloading assets. And as far as I can tell, there's no attempt to hide the Megascans content behind a specific engine only. So, it's free-ish is probably the better way to put it. Now, it is, however, an unbelievable resource, and no matter how you swing it, the level of assets and materials is very, very high. Okay, so over here, you'll see a couple of things. We have on the left Home, where you can go ahead and click on the Home tab. And if you think of this as content that is nested within folders, is a good way to interpret the Megascans library. So you can see first that we have 3D assets. These are going to be objects. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on this tab here for props. And let's go ahead and click on this tab here for recreational. And I'm going to click on this wooden toy horse. Okay, so you can see here, you can sign in to download. We should point out that Quixel Megascans is also available as a standalone entity. In other words, there is a standalone browser that you can effectively download. So I'm going to tab over to that, and you can see that's what I have here. So you can use either or. I've had great success downloading from either one. Quixel does say that the launcher, the standalone bridge, is actually faster. This is Quixel Bridge here, which is effectively just the standalone launcher for the Megascans. Or you can actually go back and use the web-based version. I've had success using both, and I don't really see there's much difference in terms of download speeds. Okay, now, these objects tend to be categorized nicely. So for example, under props, we have everything from books down to wheels, to wood, to trash. Now, 3D assets are very good. I'm going to go here and I'm going to click back here and let's go 3D assets. And there's a couple of things that we do want to be mindful of. Props, recreational, and this little wooden toy horse. Now, you can see I'm in the bridge version, which it looks slightly different to the web version. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see we have a couple of things. We have the exact categories here, which is really very, very useful. We can also copy the asset link or copy the asset ID, which is really useful if you're using Megascans with Twinmotion. You can search directly for these, which is really brilliant within Twinmotion itself. You'll also notice that we have a resolution setting here. Now, in the next section, we will talk about some of the tips and tricks you'll need to be aware of when working with Megascans. But for this part, I just want to talk about the layout and organization. One thing to note on a lot of the props is Megascans were really very much intended for video games primarily. So if you were, for example, to go to this really nice interior, you may find that they are not constructed as cleanly as many video game artists would probably like. There's a lot higher level of detail. Now, if we click on this fireplace, you can see, I mean, this is very, very, very cool, but it's also quite ornate. And if we were kind of to download this, you'll actually see there's quite a lot of detail in these models. So a sort of caveat would just be mindful of how many of these you're adding to your scene. All right. If we go over here then to the left as well, you can see we've already looked at 3D assets. 3D plants, I have not utilized these in D5 because D5's library is just so good. I'm going to try and do some experimentation with their grass models to try and see which one has a greater impact on performance. But for now, they are available. And you could, for example, just go ahead and download these and just fire them directly into D5. For our purposes, though, for ArcViz, surfaces are going to be where we're going to spend a lot of time. You can see the Quixel Bridge, I mean, there's 17,000 assets. A lot of them are going to be materials, and these materials are very, very good. For example, this gravel material, shoreline beach rocks, let's go ahead and take a look at that. You can see on the right, it is a surface, and we have all the criteria, the keyword searches over here. We can also scroll down and see related assets. So we could click on something similar-ish, something that's sort of tonally similar, has these same keywords, but might be a slightly different biome or environment. Now, you can also see we have options for resolution. We can go from 2K, 4K, and 8K. I believe the smallest that the bridge does or Megascans does is 2K, which has kind of become pretty standard at the moment. And we also have options here for download settings and export settings. Surfaces is where you will do a lot of looking for materials that you want to use. And I will say, from my own experience, the asphalt, the concrete materials, and the marble and stone are really, really, really stunning. Now, also additionally on the left, we have a few more categories that are worth taking a look at. Decals. I may do a little video in D5 on how to use decals and how to bring them in. Had sort of mixed success doing that. But in a follow-up video, I'll talk about bringing in some of these. Decals are effectively just imperfections. Think of them as free details that can be added to your scene. And there's some really useful ones here. Stains are really useful, potholes. Anything that adds wear and tear to your scene is going to help sell it. We also have the category of atlases, which is basically vegetation. Again, we'll talk about these in a little bit later. Imperfections are going to be quite useful. You can bring these in onto your materials if you have say for example, your material has no roughness map. You can go ahead and bring one of these in to add some wear and tear. We're also going to talk a little bit later on about how you can actually add these to maps within Photoshop just to make your materials look a little bit more complicated. Displacements will work in a similar fashion. You can load these in the height map of your D5 material if you wanted to go ahead and add a little bit more surface variation. For example, concrete tile displacement will displace the surface, or at least give the illusion of more complicated geometry. Now, lastly, we also have some brushes, which I've not utilized at all. You can use these with Quixel's other software, which should be getting a massive update in 2023, which will be really, really nice. That will be Quixel Mixer, which again is still under development. It's currently considered in beta, but is fully functional for material painting. Now, in addition, we've also got some really wonderful sections over here on the left. Collections will allow us to look in a thematic approach to content. So for example, if we wanted to look at something in particular, we can go click on contemporary surfaces, and here you can see we have a whole pile of surfaces that have been put under this category of contemporary. You've got some really fantastic ones here. This will be really good for those of you who like working with like displacement mapping. These historic surfaces will look really, really good. And again, we'll probably do a short video on really texturizing in D5. And lastly, the main thing that I've looked at is the community tab. Here you can see where basically community members have done a really good job doing some fantastic work using assets and sort of collated them into, particular categories. Really good stuff. Now, a couple of other things to note. The Megascans, the content that you've purchased, will actually be under the Purchase tab here. And you can see the ones that you've actually gone ahead and already bought or downloaded. And you can also see where you have a Favorites tab as well. And I've gone ahead and added some previously favorited materials. Okay, in the next section, we're going to talk about getting your content downloaded and exported out of Quixel Megascans. And then we'll talk about how to get it into D5. Okay, in this section, I want to talk about how you can get your content downloaded from the Quixel Bridge and actually into a usable format. And before we do that, there's a couple of steps that I think are really, really, really important. And, if you only pay attention to one part of the video, this is probably it. And this sort of was frustrating to me because I didn't really know what was going on. But let's take a quick look at I'm going to use a 3D asset here, and I might as well just use this piece of wood here. All right, brilliant. Wooden branch looks wonderful. Okay, I've got it selected, and I want to download it. The first thing you will need to do, though, is actually go right here where my mouse is, beside the resolution slider, and click on this. Download settings and export settings. I'm going to go to download first. Okay, this is really important. If you were to reset this back to its sort of reset to defaults right here, you'll notice some of these will actually disappear. So this is the download settings for the textures. So for substance, I'm sorry, for basically surfaces. Now, you'll notice that you want to make sure that albedo is ticked, metalness, roughness, specular, gloss, displacement, and normal. You can also add cavity and AO. In fact, if you probably wanted to be really, really sure, tick all of these. Just go ahead and just turn on all of them. What this will do is make sure that when you download an asset, for example, or for an actual texture file, you'll download all of the available image files. In other words, everything that goes along with that surface or material. So that would give you your albedo map. It should give you everything that you'll need within D5 and possibly some materials that, I should say some maps that you can utilize in other software as well. So for example, if you wanted to bring this into, for example, Substance Painter and maybe tweak it or add decals there, it helps to have as many maps as you can possibly have. You know, Substance Painter will use curvature as well. It'll really use the AO. It can also use opacity. So just, you know, when in doubt, tick everything is my advice. Now, not every surface or material is going to have all those maps. Some will only have a handful, especially the metallic ones will only have a handful of these. Really, they'll just have, you know, the actual metalness map and then the albedo, and probably that's kind of about it. And then maybe a roughness or specular map, but that's about it. But when in doubt, tick everything. Okay, the second thing we do want to talk about is models. When you're downloading an asset, for example, this really lovely wooden branch model, you will notice a couple of things. The first is the format that you want to download it in. I have gone ahead and just set this to FBX. ABC, I think, is Alembic. I'm not really sure what it's for. I think it's for animation. So just FBX. Almost every software at this point has utilized FBX. It sort of has become in many ways the standard, very much replacing the older OBJ format. So when in doubt, FBX is your friend. Okay, the second thing is MetaHumans. I haven't really utilized these at all, so I've just left it at its default. Okay, now you'll also notice that we have this LOD. This stands for level of detail. So for example, this wooden branch model, level of detail 0, which is basically, think of it as, so level of detail is basically exactly that. In the games industry, you would kind of utilize these assets further away from the camera would utilize less detail. In other words, they'd be lower poly models. They probably wouldn't look as good. In fact, up close, they look kind of rather shabby and kind of poor. But close to the camera, you'll be using the level of detail that's the highest. In other words, there's a give and take between the sort of the quality of the model, the level of detail, and sort of how close it is to the camera or how much you need it to be visible. And so here in the Quixel Bridge, you can actually set your LOD. You could actually download multiple versions of the same model in basically deteriorating, if you will, quality. So LOD1 is going to be the highest quality model. That's going to have the highest number of tries. So generally, what I've kind of done is sort of go between these. I'm going to uncheck these guys here, but you can go from basically having the highest, the best looking version of the model all the way down to the lowest. And this means you can utilize the same model quite a lot without having a huge hit on performance. D5 is an incredible renderer, but you do still have to be mindful of the amount and density of the geometry that you bring in. Okay, in addition, you can also see we could download the high poly source if you wanted to do your own texture baking in Quixel Mixer or Substance Painter or even ZBrush. You can download the source Z tool and brushes that are associated with it as well. But these settings should get you pretty much up and running. You may also have to go to settings and manage plugins. Depending on what you're working with, I've gone ahead and downloaded the Unreal Engine plugin, 3ds Max, and Blender. This will usually prompt you to go ahead and download these, so that shouldn't be as much of an issue. These are the main things, making sure you get the materials. Now, one last thing that I forgot to mention, displacement. I'm not sure if they've changed this. Older versions of Quixel Bridge used to download the normal map in just the EXOR file format, which I personally had no experience with and didn't really know what to do with it. I think by default now it's set to JPEG plus EXOR. I've gone ahead and changed my displacement to just a JPEG map. Okay. One last thing I want to mention before we move on is going up to settings and go to export settings. And you may have to set this up the first time that you use the bridge. So you'll notice here we have options for export target. I've gone ahead and changed this to custom disk export. Otherwise, by default, the bridge is going to try and link to a software in particular. So you want to make sure that you set this to your custom disk export. Again, This is one of those settings that, I kind of had to figure out the first time I used it, and hopefully I can spare you guys from having to do that. The other thing to be mindful of is the export location. So I went ahead and I've set this up to be a manual location on my D drive, which is my storage folder. And it's gone ahead and just named it Megascans Materials. And this will effectively set up a number of folders for you. These folders will line up very consistently with some of the category headings that you'll see over here. So for example, imperfections will be there, decals, brushes, and surfaces will all be folders that are made. Okay. With that being said, I'm going to bounce over to some of the sort of assets that fit the theme that we're going for, and we're going to go ahead and download those. All right, I'll spare you from watching that, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, everybody, let's go ahead and start bringing in some of our assets into D5. You'll notice I made a few changes here. I've gone ahead and just increased the size of our water, and I've gone ahead and doubled the landscape area. This will be the rocky part of our beach, and I've gone ahead and made a new plane. This is going to act as a sort of transition area in between the different parts of the beach. So it's a little hard to see because it's going to be kind of placed right into the water, but we should be able to see it if we go ahead and update D5 with the converter. And we can't really see it right now in D5, and you can see this water looks really, really jagged and not great. That will all be fixed up momentarily. Okay, let's go ahead and bring in our assets. We're going to go to the top left here, and I'm going to go import. I'm going to go through this once, and hopefully you guys will totally get the hang of it after that. Go to where your content has been stored, in this case, Megascan Materials. And I'm going to go ahead and download the huge beach rock formation just because that one's really easy. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to bring in LOD 0. You can see over here on the left, it will load up the FBX. And I'm going to left click on that. And yeah, that's a pretty large beach rock formation. Let me go ahead and just place this close to the camera so that we can see what we're doing here. Now, I'm going to hit I on the keyboard, grab my eyedropper, and let's apply our materials. So I'm going to click on the base color map, left click here, load this up, and this should go to, there we go, albedo 4K. Go ahead and click on that. Yes, that looks really, really nice. You can see it comes in, it's lined up perfectly. There's no weird problems or stretching or distortion. Looks good. A little bit shiny right now, but we can fix that momentarily. We do want to click on this settings option and make sure that the base map, I guess the albedo, or what used to be called the diffuse, but now the albedo, is set to screen space RGB, sRGB. We don't need to tweak anything else here. That should be fine. Normal map, click on that. Let's load up the 4K LOD. And I'm going to go ahead and just crank up the normal map here. I've generally cranked the normal map on anything that I brought in from the Megascans. I don't know if that's strictly speaking correct. Perhaps somebody can let me know in the comments. But if we go ahead and just put that to 1, click on the settings here and make sure that this one is set to linear. And I think, again, I'm going to have to double check here. I do believe you need to click the inverted normal map. This will flip the green channel, and I think you will want to do that. Again, maybe somebody let me know on that. I'll have to do a deep dive into materials for that. Okay, specular. Let's go ahead. We are going to use that PBR metalness workflow, but it's nice to have that specular mapping. Just throw it right into the map settings and let it kind of do its thing. Roughness. Let's go ahead and load up our roughness 4K. Yeah, looks good. I am going to go ahead and crank the roughness and the specular up to 1 on both of these. And again, just make sure these are set to linear. They should not be screen space. Just linear is fine. That looks nice. Metallic map. We shouldn't really have one for this, or if we did, it would be entirely black anyway. So I think we can just leave that. And the AO, I'm going to click on this guy. And I am actually going to go ahead and just put in the cavity into the AO map, which is, again, not strictly right, but, there we go. I think that will work fine. Might be a little hard for you guys to see on your screen, but you can see if I crank it to the right, you do get more definition. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and continue bringing in assets and materials, and I'll bounce back when I've got them brought in, and then we'll start placing them in our scene. So here you can see we've gone ahead and brought in a few more assets. So these are just variations on the rocks, and I think all in all, they look pretty good. You'll notice, however, though, that our beach scene still looks a little unfinished. We need to actually bring in a surface. This will basically encompass most of the beach. So I'm going to go ahead and select this gray area here. We're going to go to base color. We're going to go back to our Megascans. We're going to go look for shoreline beach rocks. I'm going to go ahead and download this. Go ahead and load up the albedo. This is a 4K texture. I'm going to load up the normal. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that's inverted. I'm going to go ahead and load up the specular and our roughness and our AO. We're actually going to put again into the AO. We'll actually put, oh, we have an AO map here. Let's go ahead and put that in right there. And I'm going to crank that up just a little bit. And I'm going to make sure that this one is also set to sRGB. Make sure our albedo is sRGB, and make sure the rest are set to linear. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a displacement map as well. And under height, we're going to go ahead and put displacement. Okay, there we go. You won't notice a huge amount of difference in the viewport, but if you were to crank our displacement map, you can kind of see the effect that it has. I will say displacement mapping in D5 seems to work really well on flat planes and flat surfaces. I'm having mixed results at the moment with it working on objects. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things you can apply a height map, but for now, maybe limit it just to surfaces. And if we kind of spin the sky a little bit, yeah, you can kind of see the shadowing and everything looks a little bit better. If I zoom in a little bit closer, you can see the strength of that displacement. Now, for displacement to work as well in D5, I understand that the normal map has got to be cranked all the way to the right. And all of that looks pretty good right now. And again, we can adjust the AO. So I'm going to put these pebbles here. Base color looks fine. Okay, so that looks nice. I'm going to go back to SketchUp. And we're going to hide some of this, and we're going to adjust the transition rocks that we had placed here as well. Okay, with our additional shoreline rocks placed, we've got basically two different rock materials that will be hopefully visible when we go ahead and position these. Let me go back to SketchUp, select the shoreline rock, and I can go ahead and just drag this down a little bit. I just don't want it kind of floating. Yeah, I think that will kind of work. What a nice little transition. And I'm going to go into my water group, use push-pull, and just ever so slightly kind of lift the water up. I don't want it to be too high, just a little bit more. There we go. Looks nice. Go ahead and refresh in the D5 converter. And here we go. Okay. Yeah, taking shape. Now, next step is to select what will be our water. Go ahead and go to the materials, and let's go ahead and convert this to a water material. And wow, yeah, I think that just looks really fantastic here. I'm going to go ahead and just make sure the base color is set to white. And you can see here we've got options for refraction, the flow, and the depth, which is depth is effectively going to be that. Give the illusion of less visibility. I'm just going to tweak some of these settings just a little bit. I want this to be kind of very almost still. I don't want it to be particularly like wavy per se. Okay, with that being said, let's start placing our objects around our scene. And you know, this is just, we're just going to build our scene. And I'm going to just put some of these rocks over here. And bearing in mind, these guys have that high LOD. We're just going to try and frame our shot a little bit better. That's all we're going for. So give the impression that, you know, there is, you know, we're on a shoreline, we're on a beach, and just a slight curve in the scene. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause and just build up our scene placement. Okay, everybody, so now you can kind of see how things are looking. We've got our water going on, and I've gone ahead and just placed our rocks and just kind of sort of strategically placed them in areas to form a nice kind of L curve where the view goes pretty much from here, around this area on the screen, and curves around to the right. In the background, I've gone ahead and sort of just duplicated some of the huge boulders. I think this was called Huge Beach Rock. And I've gone ahead and placed them and dotted them out along the coastline like this, just a little bit. And then we've also gone ahead and set up our scene camera. Now, this is liable to change, but just for now, this is sort of the view that I'm working off of. So we've gone ahead and placed our rocks. They're all looking good. Our objects are all looking good, and they're nicely melded into the environment to my mind. And we're getting this nice effect where water is kind of coming in a little bit. Now, I don't know if we really see the second plane that I had planned. I just hope for have kind of different kind of pebble there, but for now it's okay. So now we've got to add just a few more finishing touches. So I'm going to hit M on the keyboard, bring up my asset library, and for this, I'm just going to find some smaller little pebbly rocks and just go ahead and just place them in the scene. You don't want to just overload everything, but just, there would be kind of stray rocks. You can go ahead and hold down C on the keyboard to just place these, and I'm just going to dot some of these objects around just a little bit. And then we're going to add a few sprigs and just some random stuff into the scene. Just try and make it look a little bit more interesting. Just adding randomness. We can also go to nature, and even though we're kind of on a coastal area, you might still have some sort of aquatic plant, perhaps, something that will actually kind of pop up, maybe weeds, something a little bit like that. And maybe if the aquatic plants here aren't really working for us, let's go ahead and we'll go to our... Let's go down to the ornamental grasses here, and I'm just going to add a few sprigs of grass. It's barren, it's bare, but ultimately, there'd still be some semblance of kind of life. You do still get sort of like weeds and things like that kind of growing in and around water areas. I'm going to add some just random greenery, not much. I don't want to detract from the overall kind of look of the shot, and I do want to make sure as well that everything that I place in here is visible. So let's go back to our scene. Yeah, and just add a few sprigs. Just sort of break up some of this shot just a little bit. And if we want, we can select these and just crash them down a little bit. Put them into the shot. Make sure they're in the water. All right. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab these. And really just kind of building assets up slowly but surely. Let's see if there's anything else that is suitable that we can add in. Just a few little sprigs. And then after that, I think, we're just going to add some kind of wet greenery looking stuff. I don't know if that is sort of realistic biome-wise, but you know what? We'll just put it in anyway and see what happens. And then the last thing that we need to do is, let's just go ahead and there we go. Good enough. Is just add a little bit more stuff to the scene. Okay, so we're kind of happy with that. I'm going to see if we can add just a little bit of maybe just some dead trees. Just sort of give the impression that there's been a little bit of sort of maybe the tide has just gone out recently, and we just want to make it look like, there would be stuff kind of just washed up perhaps. And I'm just going to go ahead and place that there and place this other piece. Just sort of crash it onto the water here. Let's make it look as if it's, let's just place this here. And I'm going to hit the C key. And then I'm just going to select it and rotate it and just going to crash it there. Okay, that looks fine to me. I don't want to go overboard. The last thing I'm going to add is a story. And this is a piece of advice that I would love to claim credit for, but is absolutely not mine, but comes from Show It Better. Show It Better are available on YouTube. You can go check those guys out. They do really fantastic stuff, really great videos on visualization and storytelling and mood and atmosphere. And that's one thing I do want to add to this. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my models. I'm going to search for, cycle. And and the story that I'd like to tell is that, maybe two people come across this area and they've gone ahead and just, parked their bikes and just put it down. And maybe they're just somewhere outside of the shot. Maybe they're just a little off of the shot. But, two people that are just out for basically kind of just a cycle. And I'm going to go ahead and just scale this down because this is coming in very large. And I just want to make sure that we kind of have the right visual cues. We don't want the bikes to be so big that they kind of throw everything. Okay, everyone, I've gone ahead and placed our 2 bikes just to try and build up the scene. I've also changed our scene camera just a little bit, and sorry for the bounciness, and have gone ahead and just kind of readjusted the scale on some elements. Okay, with that being said, I'm just going to bounce really quickly into the render settings themselves and just see what we can do to try and sell really just the narrative that we have going of, you know, these 2 people who came across this rocky area and decided to kind of go off and explore on foot. Okay, I'm going to go to the environment tab and we're going to test out, I use the HDRI and just see what we can do with this. And maybe we want to do just partly cloudy and just see how that looks. Ooh, yeah, probably a little too much for our purposes. Okay, what about midday? Midday might work really, really nicely. All right, I'm going to go ahead and adjust these settings. I'm going to spin the sky a little bit. And we're ignoring the horizon line for now because we probably will end up adding a little bit of fog or haze on that. But I think that looks nice. Nice to have the light coming in from the right. I'm going to go ahead and add a sun. And I'm going to make sure that the sun is matching. So we'll make sure that's nice. We can drop the lightness of the sky a little bit. And do we want to increase the brightness of the sun? Yeah, and I'm going to dial down the sun disk radius just a little bit and make this, I'm going to make it a little bit more kind of orange. No, I think I'll take it back on the blue. I think that looks nice from here. Okay, we're going to go and add fog. And we're actually going to kind of crank this up quite a bit. We want to give sort of a hazy impression. Now, I want the fog to be kind of strong, but I also want it to start quite far away. So I'm going to crank that as well. And I'm going to just adjust these sliders. There's no sort of fixed, hey, you know, do this all the time and get this result. You know, you are just going to have to kind of wing this a little bit. And I think that looks nice. And some of this is just going to depend on whether you actually want a video or if you're happy enough with just making a still shot. One thing I have noticed is some of these rocks that we had placed to sort of break up the water, they're kind of actually looking probably a little too little. So I'm going to go ahead and just lift these up. You just want to break that horizon line. It's kind of the one thing I do tell my students again and again and again. Just hide the horizon line. That's, you know, sort of like the cardinal sin, I think, for a lot of visualization. You just do not want a weird, strange looking line in your shot. So do everything you can to go ahead and just break that. So after making a few more tweaks to the rocks, I settled on a midday HDRI sky as our lighting setup. There's a temptation, I think, to make our shots look a lot more dramatic, to make them look kind of more contrasty, more movie-like. I think the midday sky here, the midday HDRI sky, is a nice compromise here. It's realistic lighting. You can add the sun to boost up the brightness or to like boost up the orange value. But again, it goes back to something that, you know, Show It Better mentioned, which is you're telling a story ultimately. And so I think here the story is the narrative that we established. I think it works, and I think it works better when it looks more like a daytime scene. I did keep tweaking the fog settings. I do think we need a little bit of it, but we won't know how this is going to really look until we go and render it. All right, I'm going to go render it now, and we'll post the final picture here as the credits roll. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it. If you like the content, please feel free to subscribe. Subscriptions really do help with just the encouragement to keep making more videos, especially because videos like this, you know, they do take quite a bit of time. But also feel free to check out the Instagram page. And if you want more formal training, please check out the Udemy course that I have. There are 2 courses on D5. One is about 10 hours of content that goes through multiple projects, and the other one is about 90 minutes that goes through a single interior shot. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, which will hopefully be coming pretty soon. All right, David from VRender. Bye.